a chance to take time off? That is so cool. How much shopping is that?
Public speaking. Singing? Oh my God, I might be fired. I'm passing it.
Relay race, the wand.
Yeah, watch me cheer on.
I'm Eli.
What did you sort out with the tape recorder? Because I just got it.
Yeah, right. I talked to Jennifer, and she said she got me one that was the size of a tissue box.
Who was this on?
I said, don't worry about it.
Yeah. How's it going?
Good. Mind if I? That was a pretty good view.
Are we one short here? We'll get another one. Good morning. That's pretty good. I'm sure you were up very late last night. On behalf of the Institute of Politics, let me welcome you to the John F. Kennedy School of Government and to Harvard University. My name is Joe McCarthy. I'm the Associate Dean and Director of Degree Programs here. We're particularly pleased to welcome you to this particular room, this great room, the forum here at the Kennedy School, which was last year rededicated in the memory of John F. Kennedy, Jr., who spent a great deal of his too brief life trying to engage young people in politics and civic matters. So it's particularly fitting that we hold this panel here in the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum this morning. The school, as you know, the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, is dedicated to his father, the 34th President of the United States. If we had a motto here at the Kennedy School, it would be those great words from President Kennedy's inaugural address: ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. People often forget that he went on to say, citizens of the world, ask not what America can do for you, but rather what together we can do for humankind. This school, during the academic year, is filled with hundreds of graduate students from across the United States and around the world. And they come together to take on the most serious public policy and social policy problems facing the world today. It is a very exciting place, the Kennedy School. And we hope that you'll capture some of that excitement here this week and take it with you back to your colleges and certainly into the campaign coming up in the next few months. The Institute of Politics has arranged several forums, panels for you this week. And this is the first of them on getting youth motivated, college students motivated in the political process. And I will turn it over in just a second to Callie Crosley, to my left, a former Institute of Politics fellow here at the Kennedy School, who is a TV moderator and producer locally. But I would like to say that I congratulate all of you for being involved, and we very much welcome you here to Harvard and here to Cambridge and to the Boston area. Have a great week. Kelly?
Good morning. Oh, I can't stand that. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, you're the energetic crowd that everybody's looking to capture, so I want to see some of that energy throughout this conversation, and certainly as we start off this, what promises to be a really invigorating conversation about you all. I mean, everybody's looking to try to figure out how to get your vote in their column. I thought, rather than say some opening remarks coming from my head, that what I might do is just quote a couple of people that I read recently. One I pulled off the internet. Alexander Snyder Mackler wrote this comments a few years ago in the last election. And I thought that his sentiments, plus the ones that I'm going to read from somebody yesterday, sort of put us in place of where you all are thinking about across the board about the whole political process. He said, "Now, the last time I checked, a vote from an 18-year-old counted as much as a vote from a 40-year-old. So why are all the politicians treating the youth vote as if it were easy to capture? They throw in a few catchy phrases, pay lip service to issues that young people care about, and expect the vote to be theirs." I think a lot of you might have that sentiment. And then from last night, at the Power of One Forum in Cambridge, from Jammu Green, he says the issues at stake in this election have hit home for the 9/11 generation. They are fighting on the front lines in Iraq and finding it harder to pay for higher education. Candidates, he says, are speaking to this generation more this year than in past elections because they realize when a handful of voters are deciding an election, you can't ignore 35 million people. I think both of those sentiments are very relevant this morning, and we have a great panel to talk about what our overarching topic is: students mobilizing, students moving your campus to the polls. Right here next to me, Professor David King is Director of Research for Institute of Politics and an Associate Professor of the Public Policy at the Kennedy School of Government. King oversees several large national surveys of youth voter attitudes toward politics, and his current research focuses on voter polarization. He is the author of Turf Wars: How Congressional Committees Claim Jurisdiction, and co-author of Why People Don't Trust Government. And right now he's involved in looking at legislation that will impact the way students can vote and register on campus. Next to him, Chris Nowinski is the spokesperson for the WWE, the World Wrestling Entertainment Smack Down Your Vote campaign. And it's designed to add 2 million voters to the rolls in time for the 2004 elections. The campaign is aimed at young voters using the ever-growing popularity of the WWE as a vehicle to get their attention. Now, SmackDown has also partnered with the Hip Hop Summit Action Network, the League of Women Voters, Rock the Vote, and MTV's Choose or Lose to support a white paper on voting issues of young people. Chris, during the DNC, will serve as a tough enough correspondent for the DNC, and proving that brawn and brains do go together, he's a graduate of the Harvard class of 2000. Next to Chris, Jennifer Phillips is Director of the National Campaign for the Institute of Politics here at the Kennedy School of Government. The National Campaign for Political and Civic Engagement is a three-pronged effort to develop politically and civically minded young people. Under her direction, Jennifer has established partnerships with 16 other colleges to help them figure out ways to create an incentive for politics and new young participants in democracy. Jennifer, too, is involved in legislation trying, again, to ease the way that students are able to register on campus and then go on and vote. And finally, not least, is Joe Trippi, who will be a fellow here at the Institute of Politics in the fall. Joe was Howard Dean's campaign manager and widely credited with bringing the internet, and as a result, young people to the campaign and for the creation of the DENIACs. He is author of the book, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, published earlier this year. I thought we'd begin with you, Professor King, and if you would, in brief, just tell us who are the young people that everybody's going after? And you have the hardline facts because Professor King has just completed a national survey of youth across the country. So who are they in Capsule? Who are the folks?
Well, the young people are at least 26 million potential voters, but the young people that the campaigns have actually been going after tend to be the college-educated young voters. It's harder to reach a young voter than it is to reach an older voter. Work by David Nickerson shows that for every dollar you spend to reach and mobilize someone over the age of 64 and above, it costs $3 to reach and mobilize someone who's 24 and below. So the parties have been focusing mainly on college campuses and college voters, and we hope that they begin to actively reach out beyond college campuses. Still, a lot of work needs to be done on college campuses, and I just want to throw out a few statistics and facts to get us going. First is that a majority of America's young people, children birth through 18, living at home today, live in homes in which no parent present in that home has ever voted. We're on the verge of a crisis with youth voting in America because young people are not learning about voting from their parents. They're also not learning about voting in schools. As you know, civic education has largely gone by the side. So it's left up to other organizations and colleges, probably too late often, to reach out and get young people involved in politics. I was involved in the work behind the Help America Vote Act, and there are a few statistics there that you need to be aware of for organizing on college campuses. As background, the Higher Education Act of 1998 requires, doesn't suggest, but requires that your colleges and universities go out and get voter registration materials 120 days before the registration deadline in their state, and then that they make those available on college campuses. Very few schools are in compliance with the Higher Education Act, and you ought to be ready to challenge them and go back and demand better from your university administrators. Go for on-campus registration, but one of the requirements in the in the HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, says that first-time voters who vote by absentee ballot can't vote by absentee ballot in Michigan, Illinois, Nevada, Tennessee, and in Louisiana. We did not anticipate this when we wrote the Help America Vote Act, and it's going to make it harder for those students from those states to actually vote. There are also new ID requirements for voter registration and especially for first-time voting in states, and they differ by states. I encourage you to pay attention to these differences. For example, it's hard in Delaware. You can't vote with simply a college ID, and every state has slightly different rules and regulations. You're on the vanguard. You're the forefront of this new generation trying to get them to vote. My generation, the boomers, have largely failed your generation. Your parents, the Generation X, the me generation, has largely failed you, the we generation. It's up to you to get yourselves mobilized, to demand from your colleges and universities that they're in compliance with the Higher Education Act, and to work to try and get as many people on campus and off campus registered to vote.
Well, that's good to know
beginning.
About how you can register to vote, but first you have to be motivated to register to vote, right, Chris?
Absolutely.
And I'm wondering, what are the issues that are really driving what some people are calling the 9/11 generation to want to register and to want to vote?
Well, that's what we're working on, to Smack Down Your Vote. We created this thing called the Voter Issues Paper with everyone at the IOP and all the researchers, and we let everyone tell us what the issues are that young people care about. And we found that it's basically the same issues that everyone else cares about it, but just from our perspective. You know, it's Iraq first and foremost, probably, especially because 70% of enlisted men and women are under the age of 30. So when I go to Walter Reed Hospital, go visit the troops, when you go room to room, it's guys that are my age or even younger. So when you're talking about the war, it's not, and I listen to the politicians and the presidential candidates talk on TV this week and say, we're sending our children to war. And it's like, no, hello, you're sending, me and my buddies. So it's that kind of stuff. It's education, especially, getting loans for college, or, grants and loans, because we're all graduating with a lot more debt than the people did 10 years ago, including me going here. And then the economy, getting your first job, being able to pay for health care, all that stuff is kind of slipping away. My health care disappear from my COBRA in November, and I don't know where I'm getting it, so it's going to cost me an arm and a leg. And then just motivation and vision. Young people want to know, why are these guys running? Especially, we all have a good BS meter, and we see how hard it is to run, to be a candidate, and how much you get your life, looked at and abused, and go through all this horrible process. And you see, it's all spent doing speeches and campaigns, and Not a lot, doesn't seem like a lot of work gets done. So you wonder, who are these guys and why are they there? Are they there to make a difference, or are they there to get their buddies some breaks, or are they there to, be famous? What's the story with that? So those are the issues that we're focused on. And with our program, the idea is to get, I find that, when I go speak at high schools and colleges, the kids that are passionate about voting are the kids that know something, the kids that are knowledgeable, the kids that read, but the ones that don't, the ones that just say, screw it, I don't want to listen about politics, they don't want to vote because they don't know the issues are important to them. So we're trying to teach them, these are the issues that are important to you, these are the things that will affect you, and once they know that, they're much more likely to go, oh, gee whiz, my vote's going to change which future I'm going to have. So that's our program.
It's making that connection between the issues and how it involves them, isn't it right, Jennifer? And what are you hearing from all of your partners and the work that you've done across the country with students to actually get to the point of registering?
Well, as Chris said, I think it's really important to think about what the issues are, and we've really worked hard to educate that it's a perspective and to try to get the candidates to focus on speaking about these issues, not just jobs for the economy, but what's it like to be graduating from school with a mountain load of debt and trying to find a job that's at least meaningful, if not gonna pay a lot of money. So that's part of it. But then there are a lot of sort of technical pieces. As David mentioned, the 5 states that you have to register in person in order to vote absentee, that throws a monkey wrench into things. 40 to 50% of college students we've found will be voting absentee, and each state has a different set of rules. So knowing the deadlines and the procedure for asking for an application, filling that out, sending it in, getting your ballot, sending that in by all different dates is really important. And I think that so for students, I think the key is to become very knowledgeable about those pieces. If you go back, it shouldn't all be on you. You can put together a team if you have a strategy for how you're going to reach people, if you have knowledge, and then put together a calendar and really look at some of those dates and what's meaningful. If you don't get your application in on time, it doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to vote absentee ballot. So, people are being cut off from voting in September or October before the election even comes around. And a lot of students, a lot of your peers, you guys are more motivated, but a lot of them won't start paying attention until September or October, and it could already be too late. So that's some of the work that we have to do and we have to get students to do. And then I think the last piece is to have a message, to really use some of the information about the issues, and then you guys are partisan. The efforts that we do are nonpartisan. But you really have the opportunity to connect your candidate and his message to what's important for students. So you can go both ways. You can start putting pressure on the party and the candidates and say, you know what, you're really missing the boat here. I don't have anything that I can take to the students. So you really need to use that communication both ways. So operations, strategy, knowledge, and message, I think, are key.
Have you seen evidence, let me just follow up, that some of this bureaucratic business is keeping people from registering? I mean, do they just turn away and say, okay, I wanted to, but I can't deal with this?
We have it anecdotally, and what we're doing with each of the schools that we work with is they're creating efforts that fit their campus. We said it's up to you to get your campus registered, educated, and mobilized. And what we're going to do is evaluate that, and we're looking for information that comes back. I think personally the absentee voting system is insane. It's really not fair. It's really disenfranchising this group of voters, and we need to do something about it. But we need to document what's going on, and that's what we're going to try to do this year.
Joe, you've been credited with bringing the internet to the campaigns, invigorating the Dean campaign, and in fact, bringing young people. But some of the research indicates that young people really respond more one-on-one as opposed to through any kind of device or other kind of process to bring them to the system. What are you saying, and what are you at this point?
Well, I mean, I think it is peer-to-peer. I mean, peer-to-peer, you talking to each other is the only way this is going to happen. But I also think that's what the net is. I mean, that's what Napster was. I mean, you guys have such amazing power that you brought the recording industry to its knees and radically changed it forever. Napster may not have won, although that remains to be seen. But it cannot be denied that it was your generation that literally tore apart a top-down recording industry and wreaked havoc on it. The Dean campaign, in a large part, was the same thing. A lot of people connected peer-to-peer, wreaking havoc on a political system and political leadership that's failed the nation. Again, getting back to what the professor was talking about generations that failed, I mean, they've just failed your generation in terms of participation, in terms of talking about voting, in terms of just about anything. The reality is, no one's going to do this for you. No one. You're going to have to do it yourselves. And that's what's so cool about what's going on out there. I mean, it's not just WWE and these other, but they're like my favorite, to be honest, is votervirgin.com, which is a bunch of young people trying to reach out and make sure that you know it's okay to break your virginity in terms of voting. And they you don't have to have protection to vote.
Good message.
They have safe voting pamphlets, and I mean it's a very talking in their own language peer-to-peer that is rolling around the net now, and it's really a clever campaign made up of young people who are talking in your language and in your medium. Most young folks are now on the internet more than they're watching television. The people who don't see the internet as a dominant tool, the only question I've got for them is, talk to me when you guys are 80 years old. Because if it's only going to get worse. I mean, it's only, in terms of the net's better as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, and so you know how to use it. You have the tools. They're out there. And again, no one's going to, the one thing from doing 7 presidential campaigns, which makes me certifiably insane, is that there's no knight in shining armor who's going to get on a white horse and ride into Washington and change things for you. You have to do it. And your generation has tools that mine would have envied. I mean, if we had the internet during the Vietnam War, the tools that you have to communicate with each other, to empower each other, and what the Dean campaign proved, I think the biggest problem is not just your generation. Politics has taught everybody, this whole 40 years of broadcast politics has taught too many Americans that they can't make a difference. That their $25 check, or they're walking in their neighborhood for 4 hours, or they're going to the poll for 10 minutes is a huge waste of time. That there's no way that an individual can stand up against 33 lobbyists in Washington. For every member of Congress, there's 33 of those guys. That there's a reason we don't have health care, because no matter what you do, Harry and Louise and the lobbyists are going to come out and bash it down. And that process has taught too many people it doesn't matter. What the net did, and what the Dean campaign did, and what your generation's doing, is woke up people to the fact that, yeah, you're right. Me by myself, 25 bucks, or going for 10 minutes to vote, or walking in that neighborhood for 4 hours, ain't gonna change a damn thing. 200,000 Americans, 600,000 Americans, 2 million Americans start doing that. Your generation starts doing that, and you'll change everything. And that's the message that you have to get out there.
So they've got the tools. You and your generation have got the tools. There are critical issues that we've described, and yet there is a continuing, seems to be, turn away from the voting process and politics in general. And I wonder, David, if you might speak to what the latest survey found in terms of how young people are responding or not responding to what they view as politics.
It's interesting, young people are very involved and interested in community service. 73% of college students at 4-year colleges say that they have been involved in community service in the previous year. About 58%, depending on the survey, claim that they've done it in the previous month. That's probably a little bit high, but there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm for community service, and they see politics as not community service. They see politics as bad and community service as good. And you can understand why when we've seen, no offense to all the work you've been doing, but a cynical media focusing on negative aspects about politics. When most of what happens in politics isn't done at the national level or even the state level, it's at the local level, right? There are over 511,000 elected officials in the United States of America. only 2 of them are named John Kerry and President George Bush. There are over 250,000 names will be on the ballots this fall. Many at the local level where people can make a difference with 10 votes, 20 votes, 30 votes. Because the problems that we see in community service, the problems that we're trying to rectify in community service, are either because of too much government or not enough community care. And government has an important role to play at the local level. Now, Iraq is another thing and the general economy, but young people ought to be involved with city planning, city commissions, school boards. There are 14,442 elected school boards in America. Young people ought to be involved in every one of them. And then you'll see the link and excitement between community service flowing into public policy and public service. And that's how a generation builds up from its grassroots and can ultimately take over.
But one of your focuses is polarization, and a lot of young people are just turned off by that.
How could you possibly be turned on to politics when you have wingnuts of the left and wingnuts of the right lobbing bombs at each other, when most of us are centrists? 41% of college students say, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I am an independent. Now, ultimately, you're going to have to choose sides because it comes down to a D and an R if you're going to be involved in elective office and if you're really going to make choices. So ultimately, you need to choose sides. But the parties have polarized at a national level in a ridiculous way. The polarization is driven by like-minded ideologues taking over the primary process. Very few moderates are involved in primary elections. If you look at congressional off-year primaries, okay, the primaries held in 2002 for Congress, only 16.8% of eligible voters even voted. And who were they? Radicals of the right and radicals of the left. So what are we left with at the general election? You know, people on far left and far right. How can you want to be participating in that? Young people also, first-time eligible voters in 2002. So those who are 18 and 19 years old, only 43.5% of first-time eligible voters were even registered in 2002. So there's a huge amount of registration that needs to take place. And of all of the eligible voters, first-time eligible voters in 2002, only 9% voted. 91% of your peers didn't bother to vote in the general election in 2002. Well, we can blow that way off in 2004. We can have much better numbers, much higher registration, and much better participation, maybe motivated by the presidential campaign, but let's focus on local elected politics because we don't have to be cynical about that. That's where you can really make a difference.
I have a question for any of you. I'm wondering if you, through the lens of a young person, should you look at what happened in Florida, the Florida debacle, as every vote counts, or why bother?
We hear both. I mean, we hear both from students saying, why should we vote? Look at what happened in Florida. It doesn't mean anything. And then people turn around and use the same argument. We should vote because it shows that it can make a difference of 500 votes here, or if you look at some of the other states, I think it was New Mexico was very close. And we've been talking, we work with Ohio State University. Ohio's a swing state, it's a big school. If their 5,000 freshmen voted, they could swing the presidential election. So it's tough, and on the other side, it's tough if you're not in a swing state. You sort of feel like, well, my state's going this way, winner take all, so it doesn't really matter. So I think there are some pieces in here that are tough, but I also think that with the strong belief and commitment to community service and the decline of civic education, we're sort of missing that this is a sort of tough arena, and that can be difficult for first-time voters. You know, it is more confrontational than community service. Community service is great. You go and you help out people and you make that one-to-one connection and you feel really good about it and you are making a difference and it is important. It's a little more difficult in politics. It's more confrontational. You have people with stronger opinions. You sort of fight it out. You work towards a compromise, hopefully, although I don't think people see that happening so much anymore. And to sort of dip your toe in that water can be a little scary. You'll just step back and do community service. So I think what Joe was saying about peer-to-peer communication, you know, I tell the students, you know, my story to get them motivated is when I go with a crazy hat and ask students to do voter registration, you know, I freak them out. I'm the crazy lady asking them to do that. But when their peers ask them to and they can talk about it and talk about what it means, that makes all the difference in the world. That's where you see the connection taking place. So I think that there's some education. We were talking earlier that I've heard a lot of students say, well, what if I vote, I really care about this issue, but maybe I'm canceling out the vote of somebody who knows better than I do. There's a sense that maybe adults or parents know everything about the candidates and the issues, those who are paying attention. Well, you know, we should start talking to students about pick 3 or 4 issues that are really important to you and try to find the candidate who's closest on those issues. Everybody doesn't know everything about every candidate, and things will change. But you know, there's a starting point, and you need to help people make that start. And then once they vote, feel that they have a stake in the democracy. If you don't vote, then what's our shirt say now? No vote, no voice. Mm-hmm. You know, make a difference. If the message is as simple as you can't complain if you don't vote, that's at least a start. It's not the best message. You know, we want things to get better. People running for office, young people running for office. And Joe's shown you can really change things. You can really have a voice, but you need to find the numbers first.
How do you answer that, Joe? Florida debacle, why bother, or yes, my vote counts?
Well, I go back if the case has to just be made to folks that if you give up and walk away, nothing's going to change. I mean, my vote doesn't count. Look at Florida. Great. I mean, that's a kind of self-defeating way to look at things. And I think it really does speak to the failure, not just of the generations in the, you know, talking to people about voting, but, you know, everything in the country's turned to consumerism. I mean, our political leaders treat us like consumers. The corporate world treats us as consumers. Everything is consumers. The problem is there was a time when we were both citizens and consumers. There's nothing wrong with being a consumer. The problem is without anybody talking to you about citizenship and what the responsibilities and duties of that citizenship are. We have our rights. They're earned by citizenship, which means you can't have democracy or self-government if people do not participate in it, and therefore you can't be really weirded out if you haven't been participating that the oil companies are now writing our energy policy, that the pharmaceutical companies are now writing our drug policy, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you know, it speaks to how close that election was and how every vote does count. But I think the difference really is that we haven't had an opportunity to connect with each other in a way that demonstrated that you could make a difference. And that's the sea change, I think, that's happened even between 2000 and 2004. You know, John McCain was the big internet candidate. Well, yeah, it was amazing. 40,000 people signed up for him. And, you know, here you are, and that was kind of at the infancy of this. There, you know, there are all these tools, like the meetup.coms, the Get Local tools, the ability to start campus groups over the net and have listservs that could reach out immediately to each other weren't really there in 2000. Most of those tools weren't around. And so, you know, I really think that what's happening is you're seeing a big decline in the medium that let us down, which is television, and a huge rise in your medium. I mean, you guys know more about the net than I'll ever know, most of your generation. The guys that scare me are not folks older than me in terms of, you know, being able to change things. The guys I have hope for are you, because you can actually do something about it. And the key is that, you know, like I said, you can have it's not just the one person making it, you know, the election was so close that my vote counts. It's the election's so close, and you can reach thousands and thousands of people together, and that can grow and grow and grow, and the election could be a blowout if you Napstered the vote. You know, people would be blown away, and you do have that power now to do that.
Chris, I'm wondering about the impact of celebrities in trying to bring young people to the table? I mean, it's been said that Gen X and Gen Y are so product-oriented, so branded-oriented, so you bring a brand to the table. Does that draw more people, or is it still just that one-on-one in the end?
I think celebrities more draws the media coverage. You know, we get a chance, I mean, we do get a chance to set the example for a lot of young people. And I think for some people that does work. You know, if I, come to the high school and I talk about, like the last high school I was at, they had just had the poor planning. They had the registrar come the week before to register the kids who turned 18. So I show up a week later and they bring the registrar back and I give a speech to like 200 kids and 20 of them went and registered. So apparently they just walked by it last time, but once they, we talked about it, they were like, oh, I do want to do this. So, I mean, that was more of a small group thing, but I think it's just the celebrities help get the media coverage, and I think it's up to the issues, and it's up to educating them. It can't be just all smoke and mirrors and hey, look at me, I'm gonna get you to vote, and we're all gonna do it together. And on the one vote matters thing, I've never thought use the my vote might matter logic behind. My reason to vote, and I never spread that because I think, the math just doesn't work out. No one really truly expects themselves to be sitting there at home at 11 o'clock, see the election results go with one vote and go, I was gonna go. That's not gonna happen. But what I do think, especially with the college kids, and this is from my own experience. When I was 18 and I came to this campus, I didn't care about politics. I grew up in a house where when my parents went to vote, they came back and I said, who'd you vote for? And they said, there's a reason it's a secret ballot. I don't know what they were holding from me, but we just didn't talk about it. And so when I got here, luckily I was from Illinois, so I couldn't have done absentee, so I'm off the hook there. But what got me motivated was the people that I went to school with here. There were some motivated people that just talked politics and cared and talked your ear off, and eventually they broke down those walls that you start understanding the lingo, you start understanding what everyone represents, you start understanding, you already have your ideas, but now you understand where you fit on the spectrum. And so, I think the message is that not your vote matters, but if you start caring about voting, and especially when you're living in a dorm with people, you're going to make other people care. And your vote can turn into 20 or 30. And then those votes can keep turning on to more because enthusiasm is contagious and it really takes somebody to break down those walls. So, every group of friends has one expert on politics that everybody turns to get all their information. So, so one vote, your one vote, if you just sit and wait at home, do nothing, and then go vote, that's pretty, not really going to matter. But if you get engaged, and that's why, that's why the other aspect of our Smack Down Your Vote program is the concept of you vote, you win. We're just trying to get more people to vote. Doesn't matter which way you vote, but if you vote, if we get 2 million more, then young people just get a bigger voice in politics. Maybe the candidates will start saying, oh, these guys might get out there and vote. They could, I totally agree with Joe that it could just blow out the election if we really got motivated, but they'll start seeing that potential and they might actually include us in policy making. They might actually start putting our stuff at the agenda at the top of the list instead of the bottom of the list. So that's my idea there.
Joe?
Well, there's something that you just talked about when you said no one's going to be sitting here going, whoa, that's the one vote thing. The thing that we learned in the Dean campaign that was really amazing was before this all got going, before everybody saw it happening, we were talking to people on our email list and just saying, look, you think your $25 won't make a difference, you think you're working in that precinct won't make a difference. Close your eyes, give $25 or whatever you can. Just do it. And if every one of us, if everybody who gets this email, and there were 99,000 people who got it, if every one of us just closes our eyes and believes we can do it, watch what happens. The most amazing thing was, in 6 days, we raised $3.7 million. Now, what was amazing about it was that 99 out of the 99,000, 59,000 closed their eyes and did it. And that wasn't the amazing thing. The amazing thing was the reaction we got. Because, and this gets to having some validation that you did have the power to do it. Because what happened was, after 3 weeks or 2 weeks of getting these emails saying, okay, we know you don't want to do this, we know you don't think it matters, but if each one of us who believes that actually tries it just a little something, watch what happens. Well, what happened was ABC, CBS, NBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Boston Globe, all of them went the next day, what the hell was that? Look at what just 59,000 people gave Howard Dean a total of $7.6 million. He's now at the top of the game. That wasn't, so first of all, the 59,000 people just got told by the media in this country that what they believed wasn't possible, that they could make happen, and look at what happened. Those people were emailing us back saying, I knew you were right, I knew I was right, I believe we could do this, that's an amazing thing, I'm gonna get more excited, I'm gonna do this. The most amazing thing was the 40,000 people on that list who hadn't done it. And their emails were, damn it, I knew I should have done it. And the next time you do that, I'm gonna do it. Which is why every time we did that at the end of each quarter, it just exploded, because what happened is a whole nother group of thousands of people who've been sort of watching this, all of a sudden learned and woke up and said, I should have done it. They're proving that you can do this. And so I think one of the things is that if you're out there doing this and trying to make a difference and out there registering people, is to try to come up with ways that validate that what you're doing and what they're doing did work, is mattering. Because when they can see that, then it just gets it just explodes on you. And there's no way, and that's where the genie can't get put in the bottle. It's like with Napster where, it started out just a few folks, downloading music. All of a sudden people are like, I can do that. Boom. And the recording industry sitting there going like, how the hell are we gonna stop this? And they can't, still can't. So I really think it's a totally new world out there. And it is about, that's the toughest thing. It doesn't matter what we do, whether we start talking to people about issues or I firmly believe this, you talk to people about issues, you talk about your vote's gonna matter, all that stuff. If people don't believe that what their action's gonna make a difference, then I can talk about issues till I'm blue in the face. Those guys aren't gonna listen to us. Every one of those gets beaten down by it doesn't matter, it doesn't count, they don't listen to us. Screw that. You've got a voice. You can make them listen to you if you all pull together, and that's what we did in the Dean campaign.
But I think one of the challenges to that is really having the information out. For this particular constituency, you need to have an understanding of the voting process. You need to get really close to it and know what's going on, because as Joe said, once that message takes off, there are a lot of barriers that are there that can stop you in your place. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of things that we've done, which is in the folder you have your guide to registration and mobilization, which we've been doing here since 2000, and it's written by students. Everything we do is in partnership with students and staff. That is really sort of bare bones how to go about doing registration and setting up a very simple database for mobilization. And the other thing that we've done, which I'm really proud of, and Leslie is here who headed up this effort, is our state-by-state guide to absentee voting. And it's an active document, it's at our website, and you can click on the places that will give you your application, and it will tell you very clearly your deadlines. It's really made for people who know nothing about it. So we want you to use those tools. We want to continue to develop tools, and we'll be having an email address here in the next few weeks or so where you can ask questions, because what everybody said here about the message is so important, and getting people out and knowing that it makes a difference, but there are some real concrete obstacles in your way, so you need to get a hold of those.
We're going to open up for questions in a minute. I'm looking for my timekeeper to tell me how much more time before I should switch over, and I don't see him. But I'm going to ask another question, and then I'm going to, there are some opportunities for you all who've been listening to ask questions of the panelists and get right to the heart of what you'd like to know. I'm curious about what is the impact, if any, this may speak to the celebrity a little bit. I saw an ad with Andre of Outcast sitting with Norman Lear, and there's sort of a melding of the old people and the young people, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. But he admitted in the conversation that he had never voted, and that he thought it was critical that he get off that, and this year he was going to vote for the first time. Does that draw people in at all, or does it have any meaning to young people when they see that? I mean, he's a celebrity, yes, but it was more the sentiment about his admitting. He sort of said, I'm kind of embarrassed, but never voted before. I'm going to do it the first time.
I would say absolutely. I mean, you do find that it's just breaking that ice and admitting that, especially showing people that you can go from uneducated and not wanting to vote to, oh, geez, I became educated. I realized how important it is to go, now I need to vote. Like, just taking people through that process, I think, is important. So that's a really good example. Is that, it's funny, last week I was at the backstage at our WWE Raw show, and one of the guys' wives pulled me aside and said, I just want to let you know that I'm acting. She's 29, and she said, I've never voted before, but now that I've been listening to you guys on the SmackDown Vote thing so much, she's like, I'm reading the paper every day now, and I'm getting educated, and she's like, I'm calling my brother every day because he's a lot smarter than me, and he's giving me the topic. She's like, now I'm going to get educated, and I'm going to vote. I mean, it's like, you guys convinced me. And so, knowing my husband, I'm sure it wasn't him because he's kind of a meathead, but the point is that, I think it does work. I mean, I think celebrities can set that example that it's okay to have messed up, and now it's time to turn things around.
Okay. We're going to open up for questions. There is a good statistic, and there's some microphones, and I'm going to ask you to identify yourself and ask a question and not make a statement. But one statistic that I thought is interesting, get to this microphone here if you're interested in asking a question. That 62% of college students say they're definitely going to vote in November. Mm-hmm. And that's up from 2000. There was just 50% then, so that's a good statistic. Yes?
Hi. I wanted to ask a question. I feel like I know that this is targeted towards us trying to mobilize our campus, but I just feel like a lot of things we're talking about, the internet, being on a college campus, is definitely directed towards the elite, educated. How do you suggest that we target the young people, the huge amount of young people in the country that aren't educated, that don't have the access to all these sites, that aren't going to be able to find out about all these programs? Because I feel like a lot of them are people who really would care about education. Hello? Yeah. And the benefits that we're talking about. And I'm always frustrated with that because I feel like no matter what I do on my college campus, which is a very liberal campus, so I don't really feel like there's that much to do, there's just so many people who will never know about these programs, and that's really frustrating.
Would you tell me your name and
Catherine.
Mm-hmm. And where are you from?
Miami, but I go to Columbia.
Thank you. Okay.
I'll touch on that. College students are actually fairly highly likely. Among young people, it's the college kids who are the most likely to vote, overwhelmingly, roughly twice as likely as non-college kids to vote. And Harvard does a terrific job of registering our young people. You can't get a photo ID in order to register for classes without walking past a gauntlet, and at the end of the gauntlet is Larry Summers, president of the university. So we take it very seriously, but you know what? Probably the last thing we need are more Harvard kids, sorry Chris, actually voting. There's a tremendous gap between the elites and their interest and enthusiasm and knowledge about politics and non-elites. And that's riddled throughout our political system. And we can't rely on noblesse oblige among the elites to care for non-elites. So how do you reach out to kids who aren't in college, kids who feel that they haven't had much of a voice throughout their lives, kids whose parents weren't voting? Again, a majority of America's young people growing up in homes in which no parent present in that home votes. It's through organizations like SmackDown Your Vote. It's through you going out into the community. It's peer-to-peer. It's not from my generation to your generation. You have to go door to door and meet kids where they are and encourage them to make a difference. It's not easy. Registering kids on campus is relatively easy, even with the crazy stuff that we've done with absentee ballots in our laws. The hardest part and the most important part is reaching out into all communities, getting to all young people, and looking them in the eyes as a peer and saying, we really can work together.
Jennifer and Joe?
One thing is the college students, you're about 9 million, your four-year college students of 18 to 24-year-olds out of about 27 million total. So you're about a third of the first-time voters. And what David was saying, what you can do and what we're hearing from our partner schools is they are very interested in efforts where they can get the knowledge and organize themselves, but then partner with the communities that they're in. So you personally can do something. And the other piece is that, you know, there's this feeling out there that a lot of young people are liberal, and our numbers keep showing that there's a whole range of ideas across the spectrum. So you may find that the people that you're talking with or who are particularly interested are of one ideology. And what we're finding, and even here on Harvard, is there are very active Republicans, and they're going to be working just as hard to talk to people. And that's one of the issues for the 41%, as David has pointed out, who do not identify with either party. They just need to learn about politics. We're not advocating any of our organizations that you go with one party or the other. You just need to know more in order to be able to participate, and you can serve that role.
Joe?
Well, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the one I do want to give you sort of what happened in the Dean campaign as an example of why it's wrong to think of the internet as just the bastion of elitism and why it doesn't have a power to get to what you're talking about. In Austin, Texas, the Dean campaign had 481 people on its email list. We sent an email out to those 481 people and we said, hey, Howard's coming to the park, we're gonna have a little rally, come. And we were thinking 481, if half of that list or 3/4 of that list showed up, it'd be 200-300 people, that would be an amazing thing. We showed up at that park, there were 3,200 people there. And I can tell you how that happened. It wasn't, by the way, them emailing all their friends and saying, come, because once we were so shocked at 3,200 people, whether we did a little investigating, like, okay guys, what the hell happened here? And what happened was that 2 of the people on that list, that original list of 481, said, hey, if he's coming in a couple of weeks, why don't we all get together and see what we can do to make sure other people come? Mm-hmm. And 100 people out of that 481 came to this person's house. They couldn't fit in the house, they met in the backyard, and they came up with this plan. And they decided they were going to leaflet the entire Latino community of Austin, Texas, and that there was a special election with 50 polling places in the city of Austin. They had 100 folks, 2 of them went to each polling place, leafleted every voter, stayed the requisite distance from the polling site, and leafleted every voter who was voting in that special election saying, Howard Dean's going to be here in a couple of days. 3,200 people showed up to that rally. Over half of them were Latino, and I'd say roughly what we did was we put clipboards in the crowd and asked them for their name, address, phone number, and email. About half of that crowd said, no computer, don't have a computer. And so what it gets to what you're talking about, it's getting you have the ability, people who have that ability to connect with each other also have the ability then to say, what are we going to do this weekend? And this was the campaign knew nothing about this. This just happened, which is one of the things I think that's going on out there that people don't realize. That, I mean, votervirgins.com just happened. I mean, it wasn't some party apparatus. This was the Dean campaign just happening. I mean, all we did was say we're going to come to a park. And so I think you're going to see more of this sort of, because you're enabled with all these tools, you do have some responsibility. It's not no obligation, it's just a responsibility, though, to use those tools to reach out beyond. And the party does, I mean, the institutions in our country do too, and they've done a horrible job at it, because now it's, the only way they reach out to us is television. I mean, the only thing that inspires is sitting on the couch watching more of it. So, you know, I think that's the real failure of the system right now.
Okay, I see that there are a lot of people at the microphone, so I'm going to try to speed these answers up here. So right here. Okay. And tell me your name.
My name's Megan. I'd first like to say thank you to Joe Trippi for all you did with the Dean campaign.
Thank you.
because I was one of those newly eligible voters in 2002 who didn't bother to go vote because I didn't think that politicians really cared. But my question is, if we do get John Kerry elected, what can we do to make sure that he still listens to us and that he doesn't just go to the middle?
And be brief, whichever one of you wants to answer.
Well, I mean, I think, look,
Joe.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was saying, I think it's you.
Okay. I think that what's been started is also going to help the next administration govern. In other words, if John Kerry puts a health care bill through on the table, the only way it's not going to get passed. I mean, Howard Dean's wouldn't get passed, Gephardt's wouldn't have gotten passed, Clinton's didn't get passed. The reason it's in the old system is not going to get passed is because the 33 lobbyists and Harry and Louise come out of the woodwork. So what's going on is hundreds of thousands of people form this community out there that's helping get Kerry elected or on the other side with Bush. I think what's going to happen is that community is going to be there to help him get health care through if you guys go build it, or it's going to be there to hold his feet to the fire if he starts moving off. And so it's even more critical. It's why it's even more critical for people to get involved. And the bigger this generation gets involved, the more, like what you've been talking about, the more say they're going to have in what happens. And that includes it's not just going out there and registering everybody and getting them all involved for this election. It's keeping an ongoing dialogue with each other and the peer-to-peer thing going so that anytime, and I'm not just talking about Kerry, whoever it is steps out of line, boom. It's not just going to be one phone call to a congressional office anymore. It's going to be all of us saying, what are you doing?
Okay, over here.
Hi, my name is Gilbert Martinez, and I'm from Stanford, and I'm kind of greedy, so I have two questions. The first question is, Professor King mentioned that all politics is local, but several times during this convention, I've been kind of criticized for not registering in New Mexico because I live in California and haven't lived in New Mexico for 7 years. There's also the effort to really focus on getting people from different universities to register at home. Is that a long-term strategy that's going to win? And secondly, I contributed both the Dean campaign, the Clark campaign, both dropped out. And given the same opportunity, I would probably donate twice as much as I did. And how do we keep the people who gave thinking that they could make the difference, how do we keep them giving?
Short answers from every rumor.
Well, the important thing is making a psychological investment in a candidate. And that's why those $25 contributions, they mattered when you add them all up. But more importantly is that young people are actually now psychologically invested in a candidate. And you can do that at the local level with $5 or so. These Get Out the Vote campaigns and registration campaigns, one, they're mandated by federal law at colleges and universities, and almost every college and university in the country is not in compliance. So you have to hold your colleges and universities' feet to the fire. And it is a long-term strategy, because if you don't begin as a young voter, you never really become a voter. It's the story of someone who sort of votes for the first time in their 20s and 30s, that's atypical. If you learn to vote young, you're going to vote for the rest of your life. And if you don't vote young, you're not going to vote for the rest of your life, most likely.
I think I just wanted to say quickly, there's always a lot of questions about should I register where I go to school or should I register at home? And we tell people to register where you're going to vote. The only exception to that is that if you have financial aid that is dependent on your residency follows where you register to vote. So if you are getting state aid from the state where you live with your parents, then it is better to register back home. But it's much easier to vote where you can go to the poll. You skip that whole process of mailing things in. So think about it, and that's what I mean, be knowledgeable so that when you talk to other people, you can help them walk through that process.
Okay, upstairs.
My name's Adam Mintz. I'm from Duke University. In the mid-1800s, during the British democratization, John Stuart Mill wrote that more educated voters should have a greater number of votes than non-educated voters. So in our current state of our democracy, is it so important to improve our voting percentages for people who are not really that educated? And in that sense, is education really the solution to our problems?
Well, just statistically, John Stuart Mill couldn't have done much better than what we have now, because you have, for the most part, the educated and the elite who actually are voting, the educated and the elite who have influence in Congress, who write the letters, who go to the town meetings, and so forth. The political theorist who followed him is Condorcet. And if you look at Condorcet's jury principle, which you're going to have to read at some point at Stanford, at Duke. Well, you're definitely going to read it at Duke, since they're all rational choice peoples over in Perkins Hall. Is that education levels really balance each other out. The important thing is to get mass popular politics, as many people involved as possible, and people who make mistakes on the left and people who make mistakes on the right almost always balance each other out. And for a democracy to thrive in the long term, it has to have legitimacy among a large base of the people. And that can't happen if we have a narrow, thin democracy, which is what we're moving towards. We have to revitalize the grassroots, which means reaching out to people who don't go to Duke or don't go to Harvard. I think John Stuart Mill was wrong. I think that we're seeing the bad effects of that kind of thinking, and we need to get everybody involved.
I think it was brave of you to ask the question in a room full of pointy heads. Next.
Hi. Mike from the University of Michigan. Okay, so we have these slogans, it matters, it involves you, you can make a difference. But the thing I see that's very important is to emphasize that in our college communities that we need to tell everyone that when there's something that's wrong in their life that's from its society, that it has an ultimate source, and that they don't think about it. But we need to get them involved in politics by letting them know that politics matters, that the government isn't just out there. My question is, how can we get these slogans into something that they can think about on a practical level?
Hand them the VIP. That's really what we're trying to do. And you're right, because it takes them knowing that when you're 18, you don't realize what it's going to be like to be paying $300 or $400 a month when you graduate for the next 8 years to pay off your loans. And so it's getting those messages out that's going to make people go, okay, now that matters to me, which guy is going to give me the better break on this thing? Which guy is looking out for me? But you're right. That's what it takes. And so it's going to take more people we've partnered with practically everybody. So it's kind of like this big group thing trying to meld these two things together. Slogans are basically worthless without pushing something behind it. And this is the first election where I think we're really pushing a lot behind it, especially because we do have the internet. And for us, we can post Bush and Kerry responded to those issues, and it's on our website at smackdownyourvote.com. So we can go there. It also begs the question of when people don't have the internet, they can't get to that, and that's part of the problem. But that is the difference, is that we can do that differently this year.
I disagree with that a little bit. I think it's that kind of thinking, unfortunately, that has been thrust upon us. It's the who's going to give me the better deal thing that is actually what's dividing us up. Because if every one of us if seniors want who's going to give me the better deal, and if young people want who's going to give me the better deal, that's good to get young people motivated, but at some point it sort of fractures our society. And the fact is, the two things I think that Dean did different was these guys all go out there every day, all of them, for 40 years have gone out there, getting on that stage and have said, look at me, aren't I amazing? I mean, that's what when John Kerry's up on that Harley, right? What is that? Look at me, I'm amazing. And I'm for him, so, but Howard Dean went up on that stage and said, look at you, you're amazing, and you can do something about it. And then I'll take it to the next step. Somebody has to challenge the American people to do what's best in the common good of the nation, which has not been thrust out there in that way again. And what we need to talk about with each other, what we need to talk about with your peers, is that you have and this is something else Dean did, that you have a responsibility as an American citizen, And I have a responsibility as an American citizen to not just want good schools for my kids or good schools for yourself, but good schools for every kid in Alabama and Mississippi and wherever they are in this country. And no one has talked that. We don't talk to each other as citizens. It's not what's in it for you, it's what you have a duty and responsibility to be active in this country. And that we have to start telling ourselves that it's not what's in it for me, it's what's in it for all of us.
Over here.
My name is Megan Muse, and I'm from the University of North Alabama in Florence. And my question, well, actually, you addressed the problem of a kind of negligence for the parents of our generation in educating people, their kids, about the importance of voting. And what would your advice be for a campus organization to start an education initiative in the elementary schools in the community to increase awareness? I mean, we have DARE programs, but I think not being aware of voting is probably just equally as dangerous. So what would your advice be?
Well, one, I'd hope you take a look at a website, freedomsanswer.org, which is highly effective, I think, at high school level, of signing up 10 people in your neighborhood and making sure that they get to the polls. And there's through that process, one becomes quite educated. I think it's a fabulous organization. Kids Voting USA is, for my money, I don't actually have to invest in any of this, my guess is that they're doing probably the best job out there among the organizations. But one of the things that we are trying to do at the Institute of Politics is taking a look at the tests. You know, everyone has to now do tests in mathematics and tests in English. Well, coming to America in the not too distant future will be statewide required tests on history. Okay. Now, we always complain that people are teaching to the test. And with all these school boards in America, you can have all kinds of curricula out there to try and teach civics. What we need to do is have some influence at the beginning now in writing what the questions will be on those tests across the 50 states. And that's a place that you can be very involved back home and saying, you know, here's what we think that you ought to be teaching about in our high schools and in our middle schools. And then the curriculum will follow. So if we ask them to be able to name 10 Supreme Court decisions, if we ask them to be able to talk about the structure of government, that'll make a difference.
Up at the top.
My name is Lucas, and I'm from Austin, Texas.
Where?
And my question was, I'm one of the only people that hasn't written Texas off as a Republican state. And don't laugh. I was wondering, how would one go about mobilizing such a disenfranchised voter base due to what seems to be an overwhelming majority Republican state? How do you mobilize those people and convince them that making a statement is just as important as moving to Massachusetts or moving to the north where they have a better chance of winning?
I think we're working with the University of Texas. That's one of the schools we're working with, and you guys have challenges just because you're so big. But I think, and this goes to the earlier question, is it's great that you're asking us, but you guys can think of messages too. I mean, you're living right in the environment, you know your peers. I'm not trying to cop out here, but I just think that this is part of the whole process. This is part of being involved, is thinking about what will appeal to your peers, what doesn't matter, what will convince them to be involved. Is it being part of something that's important to the democracy? Is that the message that gets to them? Is it that, yeah, we'll have a small statement and we'll have a great party afterwards? Is that the piece that gets to them? I mean, I think those are some of the things that you guys can think about, and it's part of your leadership that you can bring to the effort. So I don't mean to cop out on it, but I also think, Lucas, that you can think of figure out some of that stuff.
I would tell you that from my experience, regardless of what state it is, when you're in that situation that you're in, one of the keys is to be as visible as possible. Because what happens is everybody starts thinking they're the last one. I'm the only one. You know, I'm the only one who thinks that we could do so. And so what happens is once somebody gets visible and starts doing something, all of a sudden this whole level of consciousness opens up and wakes up. People go like, you mean I'm not the only one? How do I do that? And then you start to grow. It's going to be a long, slow process, but it really is making sure people know that they're not the only one, that you're out there. There are people out there who think we can change that place, whether it's Texas or Idaho. And you can start actually building a grassroots campaign that will over time change it as people kind of wake up. They sort of embarrass. It's like, I got to be the only one. I'm not going to even say that. I'm not even going to verbalize how I feel because I'm just going to get laughed at, at the club or wherever I am. And so once they start recognizing there's other people like them, that's really what happened in the war this time. I mean, basically went 80-20, and a lot of people just kept their mouths shut. I mean, it's just because it wasn't. You'd go in public, you'd say you're against it, and the whole room would start yelling at you. And so, but once people realized they weren't the only one, and that there were people out there speaking out against, even members of Congress started realizing, hey, it's not that, the water's not that bad, I'm going to start verbalizing, and that actually started to change everything.
Reminds me of that bee girl video, the Blind Melon one, where she searches and then she finds all her other bee people.
Okay, up in the balcony here, and both of you get to ask because I skipped you. I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
So, okay.
Thank you. My name is John Howes. I am a Howard Dean delegate to the Democratic National Convention and from Vancouver, Washington. And, I wanted to ask Mr. Trippi, I asked a similar question back during the world's largest conference call in January or February. Howard Dean always preached that we have the power, and yet I think if you analyze what happened to his campaign, I think corporate media proved they have the power. How are we going to stop that from continuing to bulldoze and affect the politics in this country and get our politics back to the people and away from the big corporate media?
Well, look, this is the best way I can tell this to you. We are, you got a system that's been in place for 40 years. I mean, it is jury-rigged and built to do what it produces, okay? And I want to tell you where we're at and why you shouldn't think that way. We're in 1952. The internet and our empowerment of individuals is in 1952. I hesitate to do this in a public place, but I'm going to do it. Nixon, that 1952 is when Nixon did his Checkers speech. And the American people, you guys don't know about this probably, or maybe you do, but I'm going to go through it anyway. What happened was Nixon gets caught with his hands in the cookie jar, jewels for his wife, bags of bills, and a crate from Texas. And he goes to television to save his candidacy, and he gives a speech about this crate that came up from Texas. And inside the crate was a little puppy dog, a black and white puppy dog. And his little girls opened up that crate, and they named that dog Checkers. And they love that dog. And he doesn't care what they say about the lobbyists. They're not giving the dog back. And in that one moment, bullshit had its own medium. Okay, and that's what we've been living with for 4 years. And what has happened now is the Dean campaign was just that first moment when television started changing. The Dean campaign is the first moment when the internet actually starts to change things. Later on, John Kennedy would, through TV, take away. Nixon was a radio candidate. John Kennedy was a television candidate, and he defeated him. And so what I'm saying is between 52 and 60, that's how fast television moved from just sort of a quaint one moment of power to taking over everything. The net is moving much faster than that because the net evolves so quickly. And the real fact is you did change everything. I mean, the real fact is that the only reason Kerry's competitive and has 182 million to Bush's 214 million is because in November, 300,000 Dean people went to the internet and said, opt out of this public funding system. And not only that, average people will be there, we have your back, and will help you catch and break the system. And 4 days later, John Kerry said, I'm going to do that same thing. And you now have 1 million people who've contributed an average of $108 to Kerry, which is something you started, and a lot of people here started. And yeah, it may not be the vehicle you wanted, But that change happened because of what you did and what the Dean campaign did, and because of what this generation can do to keep that change going and really just break the chains that we're under, that we've been under for 40 years of just 6-second sound bites yelling back and forth with each other is not a way to run the country or to make any of our decisions.
We have time for 2 more questions, so this gentleman here, and then this young woman up here.
Hi, my name is Noah Doherty from the University of Pittsburgh, and my question is, there are a lot of organizations like Rock the Vote and Rap the Vote and Declare Yourself that try to fuse like popular culture and politics, and do you think this is an effective way of reaching out to students who are disenfranchised or who don't vote, or do you think that they're going to see that kind of fusion, like the idea of cool politics as sort of an oxymoron?
I would say, to be honest, I mean, it's a good effort. I mean, it's not the greatest system in the world, and it's not going to reach everybody, but there are some people who are influenced by that. And the great thing is that there's such a range of organizations doing it, from the WWE to hip-hop to, the MTV to rap. I mean, it's all different. It's ways to reach different segments of young people with the same message, that your vote counts, and that message is worth getting out there. So the idea of making politics cool, I mean, obviously, for some people it's going to work, and for some people they're going to just go, eh. But for the guys who go, eh, maybe another way is going to get them. So it's just, it's something that's worth the effort because it's good for the country. And some people look up to celebrities more than others. Some people, look up to, whatever. So if they can find the way, I say go for it. But, it's not going to fix everything.
We have time, unfortunately, for just one last question, and to make sure that everybody's question and answer is quick, let me announce that there is a barbecue after this, down the tent and out the back stairs. So, your last question.
My name is Lauren Swafford. I go to BYU, Idaho. I'm actually from Texas, going to school in Idaho. So, my question is kind of 2-part. One, the area that I go to school in is largely Republican and mostly politically apathetic. And so my question is, how do you go about getting kids active and interested in politics and registered to vote if you know that they are inevitably going to vote Republican? And then 2, how do you, what do we say to the people telling them that their vote does count, that their voice is heard if the last 4 elections have been totally uncontested?
Well, that is a symptom of the Electoral College and the way politics work. I mean, like Texas, I mean, once the Democrats say it's a red state or a blue state, I mean, once everybody puts the states into their column, and then there's only 16 states where whoever going to see a candidate for the rest of the campaign. I mean, the Dean campaign went to Idaho we went 4 times. So many times that the columnist of the local paper said he must have had a girlfriend there. The only explanation for going was that, because Idaho was gone. And so, one, I'm a big believer in it doesn't matter who you register or how they're going to vote, that everything you do to get another American to participate in our democracy again is a worthwhile thing that you should and must do, and then what we need to do is start putting the heat on these guys to come to the states that they don't want to come to anymore because it's gone or whatever. I mean, that just, the self-fulfilling prophecy just gets locked in cement, and then the Democratic strategists sit around and go like, Idaho, let's see, last 8 elections, it's gone Republican. We're not going to waste a day there. And then, why would your vote count? And so, it's sort of 2-pronged. Just get everybody you can involved, and you're not the only one who has a responsibility and duty. So does John Kerry and George Bush and these other, the other candidates. And over time, we'll put the heat on them to do it. And that's the only way you're going to change this mess that I think is a system that you can change.
David and Jennifer?
Well, note that most elections aren't for the presidency. They're at the state and local level, and that's where you need to organize and work first. And that's how people learn about politics, is through city councils, through planning commissions. You organize for long-term political victory by organizing in your neighborhood, and it has to move up from there. And second, let's not lose sight of the fact that the needs of a campaign are inherently antagonistic to the needs of a democracy. The needs of a campaign are to get out their proven voters, which is often a small base, and to in time suppress votes for the opposition. The need of a democracy is to get as many people involved as possible to have the long-term legitimacy of our democracy. So as you're working in campaigns, don't forget that the democracy is at stake. You're not just going for a candidate, but you're really working for the long-term viability of democratic government. And we are on the verge of having a completely thin aristocracy with a majority of America's young people growing up in homes in which no parent votes. You have to change that.
Jennifer, one last word.
Yeah, just one thing is that we've found that young people are up for grabs. They may identify themselves with one party or another, or most, as we've said, are independent. They're still moving. They're going to pay attention later. I agree with Joe and David completely. Get them registered and then keep talking to them. They want to hear what you have to say. A lot of times the other stuff, I think, sometimes politics sounds like a sports game. If you don't know the lingo, then you can't get into the world of Sunday morning talk shows or whatever. But you can talk to them and talk to them about your candidate. Develop your message. There's plenty of time. You have, you have like a month or so, but then you have the fall to really, they're going to keep moving till the end, which is one of the reasons that it is difficult for campaigns and candidates to count on them and to spend a lot of time with them. So again, getting back to the message, you guys are going to make the difference. What you do with your peers to mobilize each other, to have the knowledge, and then to be able to report back about what the problems are the things that are going to make the difference in the upcoming years.
Thanks very much to the panel. Joe Trippi, formerly of the Dean Campaign, and name them all, then you can clap from again. Joe Trippi, formerly of the Dean Campaign and The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Jennifer Phillips, who's head of the National Campaign here at the Institute of Politics. Chris Nowinski, also known as Chris Harvard, at WWE's Smackdown Your Vote. And David King, pointy head to all, Director of Research here at the Institute of Politics. I'm Callie Crossley, and now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.